Okay, let me convene this hearing, the purpose of which is to speak with Ms. Shalanda Young, who has been nominated by the President to be Deputy OMB Director. And let me thank my colleagues who are here with us in person, and I know Chuck Grassley is in the back, and others will be coming. Senator Graham is a little bit late. He'll be here shortly. And we thank those who are participating remotely. We are here today to consider the nomination of Shalanda Young to become the next Deputy Director of the Office of Management and Budget. As we all know, the OMB is responsible for preparing the President's budget, reviewing federal regulations, and providing the proper oversight of federal agencies. It is a very important task. For the past 14 years, Ms. Young has served as a top staffer on the House Appropriations Committee and has done an excellent job in working with Democrats and Republicans on legislation that must be passed each and every year that impacts the lives of tens of millions of years. And we thank her very much for her years of public service. Today in America, it is no great secret that we are living through one of the most difficult periods in the modern history of our country. We have a terrible crisis through the pandemic where we have lost 500,000 Americans, and we are also living through a terrible economic downturn. The real unemployment rate in America today is over 11%. Over 23 million Americans are either unemployed, underemployed, or have given up looking for work. More than half of the workers in our country today, unbelievably, in the richest country on earth, are living paycheck to paycheck. That means your car breaks down, your kid gets sick, you're facing a terrible financial emergency. We have the highest rate of childhood poverty of nearly any major country on earth, and we hope, by the way, to address that through the American Recovery Act that we will be discussing this week on the floor of the Senate. And in the midst of all that, we have a massive level of income and wealth inequality, which this committee actually will be discussing in the near future. The COVID-19 pandemic is still raging across the country and is responsible for taking the lives of some 514,000 Americans. At the same time, unbelievably, we have 90 million Americans who are either uninsured or underinsured. In other words, we have a major healthcare crisis and are the only major country on earth not to guarantee healthcare to all people is a human right. We have in the midst of all of this, not just an American, but a global climate crisis that threatens the well-being of the planet. We have an affordable housing crisis when millions of people are paying half of their limited incomes on rent. 500,000 people are sleeping out on the streets. We have a racial injustice crisis, so we will accelerate our effort to fight systemic racism. We have an immigration crisis that must be addressed, has been ignored for too long. In other words, this country today faces unprecedented set of crises that must be addressed, and guess what? A lot of those priorities, a lot of those issues are going to fall within the Office of OMB, including the Director of the OMB. Ms. Young, I look forward to working with you as the Deputy OMB Director to enact the promises that the Biden administration has made to the American people, and that is to increase the federal minimum wage to $15 an hour, to make public colleges and universities tuition-free for working families, and to substantially reduce student debt, to lower the Medicare eligibility age, and to substantially lower prescription drug costs in this country, to rebuild our crumbling infrastructure and create millions of good-paying jobs and combat climate change, to make pre-K universal, for every 3- and 4-year-old in America, and make child care affordable to every family in this country, to make sure that every worker in America has at least 12 weeks of paid family and medical leave, and in fact, in the midst of massive income and wealth inequality, to make sure that the wealthiest people and most profitable corporations start to pay their fair share of taxes. Those are not my ideas. That is what the Biden administration has been talking about. And the job of OMB and the deputy director of the OMB, to my mind, is to make sure that we keep faith with the American people, that we implement what the president has been talking about. So let me thank Ms. Young for being with us. I look forward to your testimony, and now let me give the mic over to Ranking Member Lindsey Graham for his opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think you're a highly qualified person for the job. Everybody that deals with you on our side has nothing but good things to say. You might talk me out of voting for you, but I doubt it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Graham, for that cogent and brief remark. Okay. Okay, Senator, my colleague from Vermont, Senator Leahy, wants to introduce Ms. Young. Can we roll the film, so to speak?
I'm very happy to be here today to introduce Shalonda Young. She's President Biden's nominee to be Deputy Director of the Office of Management and Budget. Now, for the members of this committee who also sit on the Appropriations Committee, Shalonda's a familiar face. She's worked on the House Appropriations Committee for nearly 16 years. She's been the House Appropriations Staff Director since 2017. Actually, it's in that capacity I had the pleasure to really get to know her well, and I can tell you without reservation, I can think of no one better suited to be Deputy Director at OMB than Shalonda. Her deep understanding of the often arcane federal budget process, her years of experience on the Appropriations Committee, her tenacity, her dedication to public service, her honesty will serve the agency and the American people. Shalonda began her career in public service in 2001 at the National Institutes of Health. She came first to work on Capitol Hill as a detailee with the House Appropriations Committee in 2005. She really made a good impression because she returned in 2007. She worked her way up on the committee over the years. Her work in developing the budget for and conducting oversight of key agencies has given her critical insights into the operation of some of our nation's most important agencies, including, of course, the Department of Homeland Security, Department of Interior, the Environmental Protection Agency, the General Services Administration. She even served as the staff director for the Legislative Branch Subcommittee overseeing the budget for Congress. And she became staff director of the House Appropriations Committee in 2017. Coincidentally, that was the same year I became vice chairman of the Appropriations Committee. And since that time, she's had to help the House navigate some of the most difficult issues before the chamber. She has a reputation as a tough but fair negotiator. That's high praise on Capitol Hill. And I can attest to the truth of these statements. I've seen these skills firsthand. Let me tell you a story. Shalonda was a critical figure in helping to end the government shutdown in January 2019. I remember the evening we cut the final deal to end the 35-day government shutdown, the longest shutdown in U.S. history. Chairman Shelby, Chairwoman Lowy, Ranking Member Kay Granger, and I, along with only a very few but highly trusted staff, went to my office in the Capitol. We continued talks that started earlier that day. We wanted to get away from being watched by everybody, from lobbyists to the press, away from the cameras. We wanted to see if we could reach a deal. But fortunately, Shalonda was with us. And as we worked into the night on these difficult issues, her knowledge of a vast range of federal programs, her understanding of the political process, and her determination to get the country we love back on track helped us reach a deal. We shook hands on it that night. And we went out, four of us, two Republicans, two Democrats, we announced it to the press. If you look closely at pictures from that moment, Shalonda is there in the background. Hopefully she's as proud of that moment as I am. It was a difficult time for our nation, but through determination and hard work, we reached a solution. And that's what Shalonda is best at. She knows how to work across the aisle to get a deal done. Her relationships with both Democrats and Republicans in the House and the Senate will serve her well. I've heard it said that the Office of Management and Budget is one of the most powerful government agencies that most Americans have never heard of. It's true. It wields incredible influence over not just the federal budget, but over policies that affect people's lives. We need people like Shalonda Young to help steer the agency in these important decisions. She's wonderful.
Senator Leahy, thank you very much. And now, under the rules of the committee, nominees are required to testify under oath. Ms. Young, would you please rise? Please raise your right hand. Do you swear the testimony that you will give the Senate Budget Committee will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? If asked to do so, and if given reasonable notice, will you agree to appear before this committee in the future and answer any questions that the members of this committee might have? Okay, thank you very much. Please be seated, and we would love to hear your remarks.
Chairman Sanders, Ranking Member Graham, and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify today as President Biden's nominee for Deputy Director of the Office of Management and Budget. I want to thank Chairman Leahy for introducing me to the committee today. One of the joys of being staff director of the Appropriations Committee has been seeing the amazing relationship and results that have come from Senator Leahy, Senator Shelby, Ranking Member Granger, and my former boss, Chairwoman Lowy. I still vividly remember the same story that you just heard from Chairman Leahy. Those four meeting to avert another government shutdown. We just opened for 3 weeks, and we needed to find a deal quickly back in February of 2019. Even in those tense moments, Senator Leahy still took the time to show me pictures of his beloved family before announcing to the press that a compromise had been reached. I will forever be grateful for the kindness Senator Leahy has always shown, even in the most stressful environments. I'm accompanied today by my parents, Lois and Ronald Smith, who are here from Louisiana. My 92-year-old grandmother, who is still in Louisiana, could not make it due to COVID precautions. I want to thank them and my extended family for their unwavering support over the years. Members of this distinguished committee, I come before you today as someone who grew up in rural America. I spent most of my youth in Clinton, Louisiana. Back then, Clinton had a population of around 2,000 people. It's where my maternal great-grandparents lived, got married, and had my grandmother in 1928. Somehow, even then, in the segregated South, my great-grandparents sent their child, my grandmother, to college. I'm grateful they prioritized education, a commitment that has stayed in my family for generations. All families deserve to see their children have that same opportunity to pursue their potential. Another former boss of mine, Chairman Obey, and I'm sorry if he's ever yelled at you, used to say a budget is your values. I share that belief and firmly believe that the federal budget can and should help make the promise of this country real for all families and all communities. I've spent the last 4 years as both the minority and majority staff director of the House Appropriations Committee. I care deeply about the institution of Congress and have been very proud to serve in that position that required compromise to ensure the American people had not only a functioning government, but one that invested in their future. My work on the Appropriations Committee taught me that both sides can compromise without compromising their values, even when that means no one gets everything they want. I will forever be indebted to this institution, and if confirmed, I look forward to using my experience in the halls of Congress to ensure both branches operate with mutual respect and work towards solutions that will improve the lives of those we all serve. I am not naive about the challenges we face. Last year, I worked on the first COVID supplemental that Congress passed in March of 2020. We were using models of past supplementals on Ebola and Zika because the full scale of the pandemic was still unclear. With COVID deaths surpassing 500,000, our focus must remain on beating the virus, delivering immediate relief to millions of struggling Americans, and ensuring that we emerge from this crisis even stronger than we were before. If confirmed, I look forward to engaging with members of Congress from both parties on this and other important work. Chairman Sanders, Ranking Member Graham, other members of the committee, thank you for allowing me to appear before this committee, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much, Ms. Young. Let me begin the questioning, and in a sense, the questions I'm going to ask you don't come from me, really. They come from the President, and I just wanted to make sure that you were on the same page as the President in terms of some of the most important issues facing our country. So I'm going to ask you the questions, and your answers can be very, very brief. President has indicated strong support for increasing the minimum wage in our country from $7.25 an hour to $15 an hour. Do you agree with him?
Absolutely, Chairman Sanders.
The President has made clear that he wants to see public colleges and universities tuition-free and canceling student debt, not completely, but making progress in canceling student debt for working families making less than $125,000 a year. Do you agree with that?
Yes, Senator Sanders.
The President has indicated that he wants to lower the eligibility age for Medicare from 65 to 60 and expand Medicare coverage to include hearing, vision, and dental care. Is that something you support?
Yes, Senator Sanders.
Good. The President has indicated that he wants to see Medicare begin negotiating prices with the pharmaceutical industry to lower the outrageously high cost of prescription drugs in America. Is that something you support?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
The President has indicated that he supports guaranteeing 12 weeks of paid family and medical leave. Is that something you support?
Absolutely.
Okay. The President has indicated that he supports providing universal pre-K education to every 3- and 4-year-old in the country and making childcare more affordable for working families. Is that something you're comfortable with?
I've seen it work in my own family. Yes, sir.
Okay. President has indicated, and we'll be discussing more of that in the next several months, creating millions of good-paying jobs by investing at least $2 trillion to combat climate change and transform our energy system away from fossil fuels into renewable energy. Is that something you're comfortable with?
Yes, sir.
President has indicated that he supports creating millions of additional good-paying jobs by rebuilding our crumbling infrastructure, our roads, bridges, sidewalks, schools, water systems, wastewater plants, et cetera. Is that something that you're comfortable with?
Yes, sir, and I've worked on it a lot of my appropriations career.
Okay. Those are my questions, Ms. Young. Thank you very much. Senator Graham.
Thank you. What's the price tag of all that?
Senator Graham, as you know, a lot of these do have high price tags.
Well, just within $1 trillion or so, what is it?
It's some very important,
You know I'm going to vote for you, but
I get it. It's expensive.
But I just want to like people back home to know, okay, all that sounds good, but I mean, what does it cost?
It sounds good, but I think you have to talk about the details. So when we talk about the global cost of things.
Is it fair to say you can't give me a price tag today, but you'll work on it and give me one later?
I will work on it.
And give me one later?
There are some details. I think there are some bipartisan nuggets in those infrastructure packages and others. I'm sure we'll get the opportunity to work on together.
Are you worried about a run on our border, southern border, if we keep changing the policies of immigration?
You can imagine I've spent a lot of time on this the last 4 years and spent some time down in Southern California and Texas.
Yeah.
You visit one part of the border, you've not visited another part. It's all very different, the topography. So yeah, I believe.
Well, let's just talk about policy.
Yep.
Not forget about topography here. The Remain in Mexico policy of the Trump administration required people seeking asylum in the United States to stay in Mexico until their court date. Do you think that was a beneficial change?
I think there were some side effects that were not, I think, of us as a country, including lack of access to counsel. Frankly, that if you're interested.
Well, we're talking about waiting there until your court date. I mean, there's 1.5 million, over 1 million person backlog in the asylum system. Are you concerned that if we go back to the old policy of allowing people to be processed in the United States, released in the United States for a court date years in the future, most don't show up, that will entice more people to come here to seek asylum?
Senator Graham, I think the speed in which our immigration system works is a bipartisan one. No one wants an asylum system that takes years and years and years. I think one of the unfortunate side effects of Remain in Mexico is you do take.
Do you support changing that policy, eliminating it?
Yeah, I do think we need to, and I think as the administration is doing, taking a pause and looking to make sure we have an immigration system that works.
They're expecting to be 13,000 unaccompanied minors to hit our border in May. Why do you think the increase?
You know, I have not seen the figures you are using. I think border, as you are well known as someone who has reached across the aisle for solutions. The only way we're going to find any solutions in immigration is a bipartisan one. So yeah, I'm concerned, but I do think there are solutions.
Well, let me just, again, you're highly qualified for the job, and I'm going to vote for you, but, Senator Sanders gave sort of a laundry list of things that you need to support that the Biden administration is proposing. Maybe we can find a common ground, maybe we can't. But I've worked on about every gang bill there is around here for immigration. And what I see is a retreat on policies that worked. I was in Arizona a couple of weeks ago, and this year versus last year, there's been almost 100% increase in people coming to our border. So for us to get immigration right, we're going to have to turn off the magnets that draw people here and try to replace illegal immigration with legal immigration. Do you support more work visas, legal work visas for the American economy?
Senator Graham, there are several work visa programs I'm no expert on, but I do know there are reforms in the work in the halls of Congress. There are some that need more reform than others. So yes, I do think the visa programs are necessary, but I do support congressional work on necessary reforms where they're needed. And I know a lot of that work is ongoing.
Do you think you're ready to be director if that job was offered to you?
Senator Graham, thank you for the question. I'm here nominated as deputy director. I hope after today you find me qualified for that position, and I look forward to hopefully winning your support.
Well, you'll get my support, maybe for both jobs, who knows? Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Graham. Now we're going to hear from Senator Murray via video.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. And before I begin, I do want to reiterate my support for Neera Tanden's nomination to be OMB director. I've known and worked closely with Neera for many years. So whether you agree with her on every issue or not, you cannot question her passion, her knowledge, her engagement on the issues so critical to families in our communities. I believe Ms. Tanden would excel as OMB director. I hope the committee and really the full Senate will swiftly move to advance her nomination. Today, I am very pleased we have the opportunity to speak today with Shalonda Young, who I believe is an excellent choice for this role. Ms. Young will bring a wealth of experience to the job. She has a deep understanding of the federal budget and the appropriations process and the know-how of working with agencies and members of Congress to make progress on a range of critical issues. As our country faces multiple crises, the role of OMB is critical to addressing these challenges head-on, from navigating the current public health crisis to stabilizing our economy, to confronting the climate crisis, to addressing the rampant inequality throughout our society. So Ms. Young, my question for you today is how do you see this administration prioritizing investments to tackle those crises? And what is the economic case for strong and decisive actions to meet this moment?
Thank you, Senator Murray, and it's good to see you. I've certainly been a fan from the other side of the Appropriations Committee in the House. I think you all will be busy working on the first order of business this week. If we do not take full steps to crush the virus, the economics of it are going to come home tenfold. President Biden has certainly talked about the next step being the need to invest in infrastructure. During the regular appropriations process, we do the best we can, especially with budget caps, but the types of investments that are needed to ensure that this country remains economic leader and competes with the Chinas of the world, we have to invest in our roads, bridges. I'm sorry Senator Graham is gone. Our dredging projects, Army Corps is woefully in need of additional funding if we want our shipping lanes to remain open. So I certainly, if confirmed, look forward to working with Congress on those big investments, because if we go too little, if we don't do what is needed now, and I worked on the Great Recession package, I think one of the complaints was in 2009, it wasn't big enough. So you certainly have my commitment to work with Congress, I think, on many pieces that have been bipartisan in the past to rebuild our crumbling infrastructure.
Well, thank you very much. You know, from the beginning of this pandemic, I've said historic crises like these demand bold solutions. It's so important the Senate continues to move quickly this week to pass COVID relief and get direct relief to all those who are struggling, and to start our country on a path to a more equitable future on the other side of this pandemic. Before I close, I do want to again raise an issue of critical importance to Washington State, and that is the cleanup of the Hanford nuclear site. I talked about this previously with Ms. Tandon. I look forward to also working in close partnership with you to make sure the Hanford mission is on a cost-effective trajectory without compromising cleanup. And I will have more to talk with you about that once you are confirmed. And finally, Ms. Young, I do want to thank you for your willingness to serve in this position at such a critical time in this country. I look forward to supporting this nomination. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the time this morning.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Murray. Senator Grassley.
There aren't very many people on the professional staff of the Appropriations Committee are anxious to get away from that. So question your judgment, but I'm glad for your public service. It happens that I'm more interested in OMB from the standpoint of what it does on regulatory review than what I do in regard to the budget part of your work. So I'm going to start out there, and I only have one question in that area. The presidential memo entitled, quote unquote, modernizing regulatory review directs OMB to update its guidance to agencies to, quote, fully account for regulatory benefits that are difficult or impossible to quantify. Under the implementation of this memo, how will agencies be instructed to compare quantitative and non-quantitative benefits and costs, and how does that differ from the current cost-benefit analysis framework?
Thank you, Senator. I thought you might talk about this. I want to reiterate the something you heard from the nominee for the director job, that the underlying EO of 12866 has been reaffirmed by President Biden, and that has served both Republican and Democratic administrations, and it says we must do cost-benefit analysis of regulations. What the improving and modernizing plan you've outlined, which I certainly hope to have a role as deputy of looking at the regulatory process, is an effort to ensure that we're reaching communities. I talked about one that I grew up in. Oftentimes it is hard to quantify when you're looking at towns of 2,000, whether the benefit outweighs a small group of people. There might be high costs, but that does not mean we should not be doing something to make those rural lives, the lives of people who might be from minority racial backgrounds, those people living with disabilities. Those things may not come out well in a regular cost benefit analysis, but I think we can all agree that we need to ensure that those amongst us who need the most help, we find a way. And I think that that memo that you talked about is tasking us with finding a way to make sure we don't leave certain Americans behind.
Okay, thank you. Another thing that bothers me over several decades is the fact that the Department of Defense is the only department of government that can get a what you call kind of a certified statement of fiscal responsibility, a clean audit, I guess you'd call it. The Department of Defense relies on hundreds of outdated legacy financial management systems. These systems cannot produce reliable data and are one major obstacle to preventing the DoD from obtaining what I said, a clean audit opinion. How would you approach this issue through the authority of the OMB, assuming you have authority, and I'm not sure that I'm up to date on that, and ensure that these systems are replaced or fixed so that they're able to generate complete and reliable financial data needed to support clean opinions?
So as you can imagine, I've certainly looked at this from the appropriations angle. And by the way, it was a difficult decision leaving someplace I've been in love for a long time. So thanks for acknowledging that. But hopefully I can continue to be in service if confirmed. I think part of the issue, DoD is not the only one that has legacy systems that don't serve them well when it comes to managing their financial house. Part of the problem is a resource problem. We often, when it comes to Congress and, OMB as well, look at the traditional spending of DoD. So do you need a new submarine or do you need a IT system? Well, we probably need both, but it tends to not be the jazziest thing that it can be sold in the halls of Congress. So you certainly have my commitment to work with you, and I certainly will work with the Pentagon, because this is, I think, the least we owe the American people, to ensure that we can show that these agencies have clean financial audits.
Okay, I've only got 8 seconds left. For decades, tax regulation generally skipped the review process other agencies had to follow in submitting significant regulations to the Office of Information and Regulatory Affairs at OMB for review. This changed in 2018 when the Treasury Department and OMB entered into an agreement to subject significant tax regulations to ORA review. Do you expect the Biden administration to maintain that agreement?
Senator, I expect we'll use this improving and modernizing memo to review, and that will be one of the things that I would love to work with your staff on this issue and make sure we're getting your concerns as we're looking at this review process.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Wyden.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and for holding this important hearing. I just want to touch for a quick moment on the matter of Neera Tanden's nomination, because I think colleagues should know that she is very much interested in two bipartisan priorities of a number of members. For example, Senator Grassley and I put together a bill to stop pharmaceutical price gouging. And we basically said if these companies are selling things like, insulin, and they're jacking up the prices again and again and again, which they have, they basically have to make rebates if they ever raise prices above inflation. Bipartisan support. We also support the effort that Chairman Sanders is talking about here today, which is Medicare negotiating the cost of prescription drugs. So these are bipartisan issues. Same has been true in terms of rural America. I asked Ms. Tanden about a matter that I pursued with Senator Crapo and Senator Risch, trying to help the rural communities get off the roller coaster with respect to their payments, and we continue to try to strengthen the Secure Rural Schools program. So Ms. Tandon, as members consider her nomination on prescription drugs and on the question of jobs for rural America, has a bipartisan track record. I'd also like to say that I am very much looking forward to supporting Ms. Young for this crucial position as well. And I want to ask her about just a couple of quick questions. I think we all know that millions of Americans are unemployed right now. Unemployment insurance expires March 14th. And dollar for dollar, there really aren't multipliers out there like helping people who are laid off through no fault of their own, because those funds that they get are used for making rent and buying groceries and paying for medicine and kids, shoes. And there's been a major limitation, is that politicians can set an arbitrary end date for the coverage that folks and communities need to stay afloat. I've recently proposed, again, with the support of Chairman Sanders and a number of other colleagues in the Senate, to basically tie this assistance to economic conditions on the ground, and that unemployment and relief checks should basically be part of a stabilizer kind of system, so that we don't get into another situation like we had in the last big recession, where we simply had gone too small. We ought to put these programs on an approach tied to economic conditions on the ground and what is called an automatic stabilizer. And I'm very pleased to be working on this with Chairman Sanders and a number of colleagues. Ms. Young, we've been impressed by the fact that President Biden is very interested in this idea. Should you be confirmed for this position, tell us a little bit about your thoughts, and we'd very much like to have a ringing endorsement today as well.
Senator White, thank you for the question. So even though I've been on the Appropriations Committee, we've had the privilege of putting these packages together. So I'm absolutely familiar with the stabilizer idea. I know a lot of senators and House members have tried to bring this to fruition. I'm certainly supportive. I think we're about to hit another cliff on March 14th. Which is unfortunate that, and I think last time we did not make the time frame. So we have people who have to deal with these gaps in assistance, which is should be avoided. I also understand from the congressional standpoint, some of the hurdles to tackling the stabilizer issue has been CBO scoring. It's tough. The way scoring has just made it an expensive proposition, but I think it's important enough. We have to keep working to find a way to make sure millions of Americans don't face these artificial cliffs in their unemployment benefits.
Well, thank you, Ms. Young. I've got one other question, but what you're really touching on is the heart of what we want to do. We want to empower communities, and we want to empower folks who've been laid off through no fault of their own to be in a position to get on with their lives. Let's empower them rather than politicians, who are the ones who, in effect, if they can set an arbitrary date, they're the ones who use those dates for leverage. We ought to be empowering people. Let me ask you about one last issue very quickly that's important to tribes in my state. OMB currently faces a decision on the poorly made recommendations of the Public Buildings Reform Board to close National Archives and records in Seattle, Washington. This decision affects Oregonians, including our Klamath tribes, who rely on their access to important historical records. We sent a bipartisan letter to OMB detailing our concerns about how Native Americans and Alaskan natives in the Northwest weren't consulted. Will you commit to working with all of us to increase transparency of the process, get more input, and particularly consult with the tribes before any final recommendations are instituted?
Absolutely, Senator. I have been involved in many decisions and fighting those from the congressional side when offices close. I understand the intense need these regional and local offices are to ensure that people can petition and get services from their government. So you certainly have my commitment to it.
My time is up. I've heard nothing but positive things about you, Ms. Young, and your work. I look forward to supporting your nomination.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Senator Wyden. Senator Toomey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Young, welcome to the committee. And I know that this is not your decision, but I do have to express just how deeply disappointed I am that President Biden and our Democratic colleagues have decided to undertake a purely partisan process to pass a bill with so much content that has absolutely nothing to do with COVID or an economic recovery. And that despite the fact that last year Congress passed five overwhelmingly bipartisan bills in response to the pandemic and the economic disaster that we faced. Those bills added up to almost $4 trillion. Each one of them got over 90 votes. The last bill, which was the second largest economic relief bill in American history, was signed just about 8 weeks ago. Hundreds of billions of dollars are still unspent. The economy is in a strong recovery mode, and absolutely there are pockets that are doing very badly, but on balance and in the aggregate, the economy is doing very, very well. And despite all that, rather than working with Republicans on identifying the areas that have been left behind, despite all of this massive, massive spending, the approach is just ignore Republicans, do a partisan approach, and spend almost $2 trillion, the vast majority of which has nothing to do with COVID or the economic circumstances we're in. Even liberal Democrat economic advisors are warning. Larry Summers has famously said about this bill that it brings on some big risks. The result could be inflationary pressures of a kind we haven't seen in a generation. So I really am very, very disappointed that this is the path that we're on. I want to just be clear about some of the specifics as I understand them from the House passed bill that has arrived at the Senate. Can you confirm that a family of four with an income of $150,000 last year that had no income decline, no income interruption whatsoever as a result of the pandemic and the lockdowns, that already received $5,800 in addition to all the ordinary six-figure income, that under this bill, they'll get another $5,600 from taxpayers. Is that accurate?
Senator Toomey, I do believe the House bill is very similar to the bipartisan ones you mentioned earlier, so yes.
Yeah, so this is breathtaking for most Americans, that affluent families with no interruption whatsoever in their income, having already gotten $5,800 from taxpayers, now they're going to get yet another $5,600. It's as if money grows on trees, and the federal government should be in the business of sending affluent people checks, maybe periodically, maybe regularly. There's just no rational basis for this. Let me ask you this. In 2020, we now know that according to the Bureau of Economic Analysis, that's a part of the Commerce Department, the aggregate revenue collected by state and local governments hit an all-time record high. There are a lot of reasons for it, but that's the fact. All-time record high in 2020. And that's separate and apart. That's revenue that they collected. That's separate from the $500 billion that we sent to state and local governments over the course of last year under a variety of bills. Now we're told that the House bill and the Biden proposal is to send yet another $350 billion. Isn't it actually quite likely that a number of states are simply just, with all of this cash being thrown at them, they're going to cut taxes at the state level? Don't you think that's a reasonably likely outcome?
Senator, you talked about President Biden's bipartisanship. He continues to outreach to governors on both sides of the aisle who continue to say that they are in need. It's not just a revenue loss fund, but also one in which we expect those states and locals to continue to provide necessary services as people depend on their local units of government.
I understand, but if you're collecting an all-time record level of revenue, probably you can provide the services that you ordinarily provide. And if in addition to an all-time record amount of revenue, you got $500 billion from the federal government, seems like there's lots of money to go around. Last question. I wonder, do you think there's any downside whatsoever, any reason at all, any concerns about systematically paying people more not to work than they make working? Designing an unemployment system whereby a very substantial percentage of workers will get paid more to sit at home than they get paid to go to their work. Is this how we should demonstrate our commitment to the dignity of work?
That was a phrase I was going to use. Certainly, people I know from all walks of life have dignity of work. They're not accepting government assistance, in my opinion, and some of the data we've seen. They're using this enhanced unemployment to make ends meet.
I see my time has expired. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Toomey. Senator Stabenow.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. First, Ms. Young, congratulations on your nomination. I've heard nothing but extremely positive things, both from Democrats and Republicans. Look forward to working with you if you are confirmed, which hopefully will happen. I also strongly support Neera Tanden. I think the two of you would be really an excellent pair, and I'm hopeful that we will have both of you. I do want to say to my friend who just spoke that when we talk about bipartisanship, certainly last year in the CARES Act, we had a bipartisan bill. We moved on some things, but then we got to, I think it was May, and the Senate Republican leader said he thought no more needed to be done at that point, that things were okay and we didn't need to act. It took from May until December to pass additional support for American families and to address the pandemic and issues around trying to get children back to school safely. We don't have that much time now. We just don't have time to wait another 6-8 months. What we have is bipartisan support in the country. We've got to get as many shots in people's arms as possible. We've got to help people, small businesses, small family farms get through and survive this pandemic. And we've got to make sure every child can get back into school safely, period. And so I'm glad we're moving, and we certainly would welcome bipartisan support from our colleagues in the Senate. Now, on questions, let me just say that I want to talk, there's so many things on your plate, but I want to talk specifics on things that I'm involved with. As the chairwoman of Agriculture, Nutrition, and Forestry Committee, right now, when we look at the climate crisis, we have a great potential to harness our farms and forests as leaders in tackling the climate crisis. And I'm working on several bipartisan bills, along with my great friend, Senator Braun, and other colleagues, and look forward to working with the administration to enact them, which will give Secretary Vilsack and others at USDA new tools to address this urgent issue in a voluntary, bipartisan, producer-led way, which is our focus. So if confirmed, will you commit to working with us to prioritize climate-smart agriculture and forestry investments in the president's upcoming budgets and through other actions at the Department of Agriculture and elsewhere?
You have my absolute commitment to work with you on those very important issues.
Great. Let me talk about something else that is certainly the forefront in the pandemic, and that is the mental health of millions and millions of Americans. We have traditionally a historically underfunded behavioral health system in this country. The good news is that we're making progress. My friend, Senator Roy Blunt, and I have been leading efforts strongly supported on both sides of the aisle that to improve quality care through the creation of new certified community behavioral health clinics. These clinics, among other things, require high quality standards, 24-hour, 7-day-a-week crisis services, outpatient mental health care, substance abuse care, and working with emergency rooms, law enforcement, and veterans groups, which is very important. So when we look at this, we're actually saving money as well as doing something very effective. The last HHS budget found that these services led to a 63% decrease in emergency department visits for behavioral health, 60% reduction in time spent in jail, which is why this is so strongly supported by sheriffs and police chiefs and so on, and a 41% decrease in homelessness. The challenge for us is quantifying that in terms of the budget. So do you believe, first of all, we should be covering these services, healthcare above the neck as well as below the neck? And could you talk about the role of OMB in quantifying some of the downstream savings from increased access to behavioral health care? And can we count on you to focus on those issues in the upcoming budgets?
You absolutely can, and I'm very proud of the behavioral and mental health funding in the current COVID package. It's much needed. It's an area, again, where I think the regular appropriations process, it would have loved to have done more, but we've certainly been living under budget caps for the last 10 years. So COVID has exacerbated these problems. It's appropriate that it be in this package, and I'm glad to see that it is. Senator, you certainly have my commitment to helping quantify the benefits of this funding and working to ensure we have adequate funding and do better by those line items.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. I think probably my time is up. I will just follow up with Ms. Young about another passionate, important topic, which is making sure that we are supporting all the efforts to protect our Great Lakes. So thank you very much. I look forward to supporting your confirmation.
Thank you very much, Senator Stabenow. Senator Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Young, how are you?
Good, sir. How are you?
I'm okay. I want to ask you about the proclivity of the federal government to persist in paying dead people. You probably read about it, but last spring, when we sent out our first batch of coronavirus relief checks, we paid out $1.4 billion to deceased Americans. And we don't get this money back. And of course, in many instances, the checks are cashed, which obviously is indicative of fraud. We have passed legislation, and let me back up. We're not sure how much we pay out in checks to dead people every year, but it's a lot. It's in the billions and billions and billions of dollars. And there's a lot of fraud involved. The Congress passed legislation to try to fix this problem. I won't bore you with the details, but because of the politics, we had to put in a provision that the legislation wouldn't really take effect for 3 years. So we basically had to agree, because of the politics, that we would continue to pay dead people for 3 more years. Can you do something about that when you're running OMB?
Senator Kennedy, one, I think you have pursued this. I know it's very important. You've pursued it in the financial services construct of the Appropriations Committee, so I'm very familiar with your work here and your consistent drumbeat. I think part of this is the government systems. We talked about this earlier with the different senators, is we have to do better with our IT systems. That is definitely part of the problem. I will certainly commit to working, just like I did previously, in improving these systems so that no one wants fraud, waste, and abuse in important government programs. It does a disservice to those who really need government services. It puts a target on their back. So I think there is a bipartisan commitment to make sure we do what we can
Can I interrupt you, Ms. Young?
Yes, sir.
Because look, I've watched you and I've followed your career, and you're a very smart person, and I think you can fix this. And to me, it's very simple. We meaning the federal government, gets data every year, every month, every day from the states about who died. It's not perfect data, but we get it. And it goes into a database at the federal government. And but the group in charge of maintaining that database doesn't really share it with other agencies. It's complicated. It's needlessly complicated. And I think that you're a very smart person. I think that if you said, look, you call the White House, speak to the president and say, Mr. President, this is low hanging fruit. We really need to stop paying dead people. It's embarrassing. And and Congress has acted on it, but because of the politics, it had to delay the implementation of the bill for 3 years. Can't we, Mr. President, issue some sort of executive order and stop paying dead people? I mean, don't we owe that at least to the taxpayers? And I know it's complicated, and but it's needlessly complicated. It's very simple. We have the data. It may not be perfect, but it's better than nothing. But we continue to send out the checks. And I think you're gonna be running OMB. I think you can stop it.
Well, Senator.
I have full confidence in you.
Thank you for that full confidence. I appreciate that. If I'm confirmed as deputy, you certainly have my commitment to work with you on this. You've raised some.
Well, you could be. You may be more than deputy. You may be the sheriff. I don't expect you to comment on that.
Thank you, sir.
Help me do something about this. I know you can do it.
I look forward to working with you. I do commit with you to work with you and your staff on this issue. As you said, the American people deserve a federal government who gets its data right, and we need to. I think it's a bipartisan effort to weed out any whiff of fraud, waste, and abuse. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Young. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Senator Kennedy. Senator Whitehouse.
Ms. Young, how are you? Welcome. I have two things I want to show to you. The first is this book, which is a compilation of a whole variety of reports that relate to, as the title says, the economic risks of climate change. We all know that it's going to change our physical world. We all know it's going to raise sea levels. We all know it's going to change temperatures, move fisheries around, change weather, create all of these physical, biological, natural consequences. But we haven't focused as much as I think we should have on the economic consequences. For instance, when sea levels rise and people who have predictive capability are able to see where the sea levels are going to rise to, they're going to go to mortgage companies and they're going to go to insurance companies and they're going to say, hey, I've got some information that you ought to have before you insure that house or before you issue a mortgage on that house. So none less than Freddie Mac, the big mortgage behemoth, has warned that we're going to have a coastal property values crash when those sea level rise warnings hit the mortgage and insurance markets that support coastal property, and that it's going to be worse than the 2008 mortgage meltdown. So that's a pretty serious warning. That's just one. We've got a Nobel Prize winner testifying under oath about the catastrophic economic consequences we're looking at. We got people, major banks, we've got the Fed, we've got foreign sovereign banks, we've got major, pretty rough corporate organizations who aren't exactly eleemosynary. And they're warning in their own interest that this is a big deal. So I would ask you to please flip through this. We'll give you a copy, because I think it's going to be really important for this administration, which has done a great job on tackling the climate change problem, at least in its early initial steps, to make sure that these warnings are made loud and clear. It's probably the most warned of hazard that we've ever seen, but because the fossil fuel industry has got so much of our Congress locked up in its grip, we haven't responded to those warnings. So that's one. If you could take that and also take this issue seriously, I will be hounding you about it, obviously.
I'm from the state of Louisiana. And
So you know it.
yes.
Yes, you're losing more of your coastline than I think any other state in the country right now. And Rhode Island, my state, is looking at having to redraw its map. Senator Kane here is looking at losing Norfolk Naval Station, because you can build the piers up higher and higher at Norfolk Naval Station, but you can't build up the schools and the markets and the roads and the entire community that supports that naval station there. So the former head of his naval station has warned that in 20 years, that thing's gone. We're gonna have to re-site that naval station. So this is all serious, and because of fossil fuel mischief, a lot of members of Congress won't take it seriously, and we've got to make sure people understand. So thank you. The second thing is a healthcare thing. I use this graph a lot. CBO, back around the time that we did the Affordable Care Act, did a prediction of where American healthcare costs were going to rise, which is this top line. Turns out, after the Affordable Care Act got passed, healthcare costs didn't go up so fast. And we actually got the lower line as our experience. So if you take the current projection from our lower experience and compare it to what that projection is tagged onto the previous experience, you get this green differential, which in the next 10 years is $6 trillion in savings on federal health care. In 2024, we're going to hit the Medicare Trust Fund. We don't have much time. We got to fix this. Nobody's going to cut benefits. But whatever's happening here that saved $6 trillion, we need to do a lot more of. And I submit to you that it's quality improvements and incentives in the healthcare system, it's getting away from fee-for-service treadmill in the healthcare system, and it's really pushing the accountable care organizations, the provider ACOs, that are doing such a good job. I've got two of the best ones in Rhode Island. World class. They're not the best in Rhode Island. They're the best in the world. They're the best in the country. They happen to be in Rhode Island. And they're driving costs down. Their patients are getting better outcomes. Everybody's happier with the better service. It's win, win, win. But we've got to understand that for the big deal that it is and connect those little ACOs to this big $6 trillion and fix the mess that our healthcare system is right now. So, and I hope that we'll work together on that also.
Absolutely, sir. And the bill you're considering this week does have some, some improvements, some increased subsidies for ACA. Hopefully can get more people in it. And I think there's a lot more to do on the ACA front to ensure that that graph continues to get bigger.
Yeah, we can spread that actually further with more work that is good stuff. Thanks, Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Whitehouse. Senator Warner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Ms. Young, it's good to see you, if at least virtually. And I think you've been very impressive in your answers. I do want to say, though, that I know some of my colleagues on the Republican side have made a decision about Neera. I hope some will still reconsider. I look forward to supporting you, Ms. Young, but my hope is still that, at least initially, I'll be supporting you for Deputy Director. I want to get to three quick questions. One, Virginia is home to about 170,000 federal workers. They have been under enormous assault under the Trump administration as they've tried to, the previous administration tried to politicize the workforce. I saw, particularly from my role on the Intel Committee, what's happened to our Intel workforce. And while I was heartened by the Biden administration's initial actions to repeal the Schedule F executive order that Trump tried to put in the waning days of administration, from bargaining rights to pay to just general morale, the federal workforce has been hurting. Later on top of that, obviously, all the additional constraints with COVID. Can you speak to how you could coordinate with OPM to deal with this overriding issue of morale of the federal workforce?
Senator, I pause because I started my career as a civil servant at NIH. I understand the increased, how much more this country is benefited by having a motivated federal workforce who shows up every day, does over and beyond. They could be in private industry, a lot of them making more than they do in their government service. So it's not about a job for the federal workers that I've known and worked with. It's about service. So that is one of the things I hope, if confirmed as deputy director, certainly within OMB, is to empower and bring a lot of that back to the career staff. I think that is I know that is a goal of mine. I hope to leave during my time of service is to let them know that we appreciate their service. We trust that they are good stewards of federal policy, and you certainly have my commitment and some will need congressional fixes, congressional partners to work with you to make sure that our federal workers are getting the benefits necessary. Often in these budget deals that come up, one of the main losers are federal workers. We tend to cut their retirement. We tend to do things that don't, I think, do a lot for morale. So you certainly have my commitment to work with you to bring back, I think, some of the things that have eroded over the last few years.
Well, really look forward to working with you on that. I have had a history over my 12 years here that something started by Ted Kaufman when he served briefly a senator from Delaware, going down and on the floor of the Senate, calling out the great contribution of federal workers on an individualized basis. Your work at NIH, you know, as you said, a lot of these workers could be making a lot more. This was a piece of public service, and it's going to be great to be working with a partner who supports that service. You know, kind of related to that, one of the areas that the chairman's been a big advocate, and I've generally been supportive of during a period of COVID, trying to help workers with increased unemployment benefits, and trying to make sure we cover a whole group of folks, for example, gig workers and others. I think it was a very positive action. One of the things that we've had some debate on is whether, as the economy includes some of that additional benefit, should cut back. And we've had, I think, a good debate on this issue, but the challenge has been to be able to do that, we've got to upgrade our IT systems within the federal government. Now, literally, we could not even put in place kind of economic stabilizers in a rational way because our IT system is so bad. We have dramatically underinvested, not just under Trump, but candidly even under President Obama. There's something called the Technology Modernization Fund. I hope legislation that I've got. I know President Biden put forward a $9 billion investment. It unfortunately got cut back in the House to $2 billion. In your last 2 seconds, can you talk to upgrading on our technology assets at the federal government level?
You heard it through several senators' questions that, it's central to many issues we have with payments to individuals, with ensuring our financial audits. A lot of it comes back down to technology, and you certainly have my commitment to work with you on. I'm very familiar with the TMF, making sure we get investments there.
Thank you, Ms. Young. I look forward to supporting you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Warner. Senator Merkley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Ms. Young, I just want to jump right into questions since we don't have a lot of time. We have the situation in previous administrations where OIRA, part of OMB, has proceeded to be a place where rules go and disappear and never to be seen again or to sit untended for years. Things like the mercury air toxics rule, rear view cameras in car, the issue of a rule related to coal ash. We have the vaping rule, which we had all these illegal products on the market and nothing happened, and millions of American youth became addicted to vaping, a situation very hard to reverse, will affect healthcare costs and the quality of life for millions of Americans for generations to come. And so how do you feel about this section of IRA becoming just this place where regulations go to suffer and die with no transparency about what is happening?
Senator, certainly not the statutory goal of OIRA, and something we should not strive to have that opinion of OIRA. I do believe we can use the presidential memo calling for OMB to lead the effort to improve and modernize, to do something about that perception and work with our partners in Congress to make sure that we fix this issue.
Thank you, and I look forward to talking with you when we end up with challenges of disappearing regulations in OIRA in the future. I want to turn then to the cost-benefit analysis that we referred to before and the decision to keep it in place. But often that cost-benefit analysis doesn't capture externalities and certainly not the social cost of carbon. Can you speak to how OMB's cost-benefit analysis can reflect the true cost of decarbonization or the true advantages of decarbonization?
Senator, I think you're speaking to the very core of the presidential memo that we've talked a lot about on improving and modernizing. I think it is good to keep a basic set of facts of cost benefit, but you're absolutely right. You see in carbon, and actually not just carbon and greenhouse gases, you see it in regulations that have to do with servicing people who might be from rural America or living with disabilities. That often looking just at costs and benefits is not enough to understand the full impact. If our goal is to improve the lives of all Americans, I think we have to, even if it's difficult, find a way to quantify these things, because as you mentioned, and as Senator Whitehouse has mentioned, climate change is an economics issue as much as anything.
So does that mean that the OMB cost-benefit analysis will now incorporate the social cost of carbon?
I think, Senator, you've seen administrative action. I'm not there yet, but if confirmed, I'm happy to get back to you on the details. I cannot speak about every single action that's occurred since I'm not there, but my understanding on the social cost of greenhouse gases, which carbon being one part of that, there are working groups that are reformed that have been done away with in order to help quantify that cost.
Thank you, Ms. Young. And President Biden, in a related issue, has committed to directing 40% of green federal investments towards environmental justice communities, necessitating a sort of equity screen and recognizing that low-income communities are often hit particularly hard by environmental effects. But that has to be tracked. Do you see OMB as having a role in tracking and targeting those investments to address that 40% goal?
OMB will be a part of that process, as stated in the president's executive order on climate change. There's a specific section dealing exclusively with environmental justice, and it lays out the members of the council that will deal with those issues, and OMB will be a part of that.
Thank you. And finally, how do you envision OMB working to drive solutions to the student debt crisis in our country?
I have to imagine OMB will be central to offering ideas, legislative solutions. I do know that it will take a partner in Congress to ensure we deal with that issue. You don't normally like breakups, but one of my best breakups has been with Navient myself 3 years ago. It is crushing the student loan debt, and I'm one of the lucky ones.
I'm sorry, I missed that. That's your own personal loan that you were struggling with?
It was one of the best breakups I've ever had, was to pay the last payment to Navient. And again, that was after 22 years after I started college, and I'm one of the lucky ones.
Well, congratulations. I hope you had a big party at that moment. And I do hope that OMB will work in partnership with the administration on the cancellation of loan debt. I support the broader goal of $50,000, be an incredible stimulus and an opportunity for so many to escape this deep burden that other developing countries do not impose on their aspiring students. But even at the lower level of 10,000, it's one thing to have it as a vision, it's another to actually make it happen. And I hope OMB can help with that.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Senator Merkley. Senator Braun.
Thank you, Chairman Sanders. Good to be here discussing something, Ms. Young, that to me, I've been here a couple years, and I know you've been in the House, part of appropriations, and I've run an enterprise that's had to really be worried about what lies down the road for it. In other words, how do you get things to work out financially? I see a trajectory that we're on that just, to me, looks unsustainable. And whether you believe in the modern monetary theory, with what you crafted, being involved in appropriations, where we're at currently, where we got structural trillion-dollar deficits, we got a balance sheet that I don't care how good you are as a CFO, would be something you couldn't be proud of. Here, it is different. You know, we're lucky that we're in a place where we can borrow for nearly zero. That changes as soon as we're not the reserve currency. You've got an impending crisis with the Medicare Trust Fund being completely depleted here in a little over 5 years. We've been paying into it, employers and employees, since the 60s. You got Social Security that is even more ominous in terms of what would happen if you let it continue on the trajectory. Tell me a little bit about how you think, for anyone here, especially that looks to the federal government as a place that you want to do more with, how do you keep it in a healthy place going from here forward? And what do you think your input has been towards being an appropriator that, to me, looks like no one really cares about how this is going to work out for future generations?
Senator Braun, I perfectly acknowledge long-term debt has to be addressed. It's probably only going to be addressed with bipartisan solutions. But I do have to turn to, people smarter than me, and I certainly listen to Secretary Yellen, who tells us we will be on a worse economic trajectory if we do not do something, not just do something, if we don't ensure the health of American citizens and then turn our full sights to ensuring investments for our economic recovery. At some point, we're going to have to turn to long term, but I don't think we've ever faced anything like this pandemic before. So, I certainly agree with you, but I do think there is still room, as you mentioned. It's very, very cheap to borrow right now, which is something I think we also have to look at when we're looking at the response to the pandemic.
So normally when you borrow money, you do it for something that's a tangible asset, an investment. Only borrow to invest, never borrow to spend or consume. Of course, we consume everything here. I think that's another thing to think about. Let me ask you on the revenue side of the ledger. Everybody's really good at spending here. I've had conversations with folks on the Budget Committee. Can you raise revenue? Do you think it's realistic that you can bridge the structural deficit gap with that? And how would you consider doing that? And can you do that in a meaningful way before you start to throttle back economic growth? And also looking at maybe what was in place pre-COVID, to where as somebody off the street, I thought we had it pretty well hitting the mark. We helped small businesses through the Tax Cut and Jobs Act. C Corps got probably way too big a break that they didn't need. What do you think about the revenue side that no one wants to talk about?
Senator Braun, I'm sure you already know this. President Biden has looked to increasing the tax rate for those over 400,000 and for some corporations who, I think some of the lessons from the tax break, did not do as much investing in their personnel as was hoped or touted before that act. So I do think there is some room on the revenue side to help out long-term debt. I do think there are some other things besides revenue and spending. Senator Whitehouse talked about the cost of health care. We've got to do something so the government isn't paying nearly as much for health care, and neither are private citizens. So I think there will have to be a multi-pronged view of how we do this. But we cannot cut benefits for people that have paid into them. I have my parents here. They're called entitlements for a reason. People have paid their entire careers in their lives for these benefits, and we have to do what we can. And part of that is ensuring that healthcare doesn't cost what it costs to provide it to the American people.
Well, thank you, and I think that's a bit of realism, that it's going to take some really hard decisions that, in my observation, don't happen often here, along the lines of having some political will to make those tough decisions if you're going to have it sustainable in the long run. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Braun. Senator Kane.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks, Ms. Young. Congratulations to you. I intend to support you. You've had a distinguished public service career. 2 editorial comments and 2 questions. So, 1 editorial comment, I'm not sure you should need Senate confirmation. I think if President Biden wants to hire you to be deputy director, I think he should be able to hire you. I'm in my 9th year in the Senate, 3rd president, and an observation about the Senate is I think we have too many Senate confirmable positions, and each one chews up some committee time and then chews up some floor time, and by chewing up finite time, then legislative time gets shrunk. So I might start urging that on my colleagues. I'd love to have you here to ask you tons of questions, but I don't necessarily think that deputy cabinet secretaries and deputy directors of agencies should need Senate confirmation. That's editorial comment number 1. Number 2, Neera Tanden. The controversy about Neera is largely over her social media comments, which could be leveled at virtually all of us. I mean, it's partly a challenge for the individual, and she's got to own that, and she's apologized for it. And it's partly the world we live in, where we say things in the heat of the moment, and social media gives us the ability to do it. My editorial comment is this. We face so many nominees in the past administration who had really intemperate things to say on social media accounts, including about me. But they apologized. And when they apologized, their apologies were accepted by virtually all Republicans and a lot of Democrats. So Neera Tanden has apologized. And I just worry that there's a double standard with her, that why would we accept the apologies of others about comments on social media that, if anything, were more extreme, and not accept Neera Tanden's apologies? And I'm nervous about that. And I ask that question not just to Republicans, I ask it to Democrats. 2 questions.
And Senator Kane, I know you were speaking, but I have not had the chance to weigh in on this question. I certainly think before this committee, you saw Neera Tanden apologize profusely about the tweets. I think what you also saw is an expansive knowledge of various policy areas. And certainly I've gotten to know Neera over the last few weeks. We didn't have much interaction before then. And I do think we both bring some skill sets in different areas where we make a great team if both of us work in firms. So thank you for those comments. And I hope if you listen to her time before this committee and his GAC, she really did lay out her vast policy experience.
I completely agree with you. Now, on to the 2 questions. One of the things about your nomination that makes me the happiest is that you have 14 years experience working in the Article I branch. The OMB in the previous administration treated us like we were an annoyance on a good day or an enemy on a bad day, and there were more bad days than good days. And they particularly treated those in the minority party, Democrats in that administration, as the enemy. But I'm not sure they were that good to the majority party either. So, for example, with issues like congressional requests for information, you'll take an oath, should you be confirmed, to the Constitution of the United States, not to a president. Can I have your assurance, and you've already been asked this by Senator Sanders, but I want to have your assurance on this. Will you treat, as somebody who has sat on the congressional side of this dais, will you treat requests from senators on this committee, be they Democratic or Republican, with respect and try to be as responsive as you can, as promptly as you can?
I can't answer that more emphatically. Yes, and you're absolutely right. I've heard from Republican members as well who not only could not get information, but would see their things important to them go to OMB to never be seen again.
And if you have a problem, or anybody in OMB, with committee members just like pestering you so you can't do your work, you can take that to the chairman, and the chairman can be an enforcer and tell us to knock it off. But reasonable requests should be dealt with in a prompt fashion, whether they're made by Republicans or Democrats. I'm glad to hear you agree with that, and I knew you would. Second question. So I came into the Senate in January of 2013. Sequestration and budget caps went into effect in late February. We had a 2-week government shutdown in October. We've had endless CRs. We had a month-long shutdown of a portion of the U.S. government in late 18 and 2019. I have an opinion about how I would grade the federal budget process since I've been here. If I was to ask you to grade the federal budget process, what grade would you give it?
Wow, that's a tough one on the process.
Well, not the process. How about our actual, not the process is in the statute book.
Okay.
Grade our performance.
Get away from the process,
Grade our
which is often
performance.
ugly. When we finish, I'll give it an A because we got there. And I think there's a lot of value in that.
I'm just going to say I wouldn't give it an A, and I would love an acknowledgement that there should be some significant improvement. That's not going to affect my vote.
There has to be improvement, Senator. I still find a lot of intrinsic value in working through an annual process, and you and I talked about this as someone who loves this institution, and I've told you this personally. My concern would be if anything would keep Congress from doing that bare knuckle negotiation where you got to hold the executive branch accountable each year. So yes, it needs improvement, but I would hate to see anything that required less congressional action because of that.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Kane. Senator Van Hollen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member. And I was pleased with Neera Tanden's nomination to be Director of OMB, and I'm very pleased with yours to be the Deputy Director. Congratulations. And I want to pick up a little bit on the process, but especially part of the process that has been broken, at least over the last 4 years. And as the staff director of the House Appropriations Committee, you were deeply involved in addressing the illegal withholding of funds by OMB during the last administration. The most prominent case involved withholding security assistance for Ukraine. And I asked at the time that the GAO, the nonpartisan GAO, review that matter and determine whether the withholding violated the Empowerment Control Act, which, as you know, is the law that's supposed to prevent the executive branch, regardless of party, from unilaterally refusing to spend funds that are provided in laws passed by the Congress. GAO looked at it and confirmed that the Trump administration violated that law. As a member of this committee, the Budget Committee, we were able to put together bipartisan legislation that included a provision I proposed to strengthen the Empowerment Control Act and increase transparency for the apportionment process at OMB. We have not yet passed that legislation. I would like to get your commitment to work with us to strengthen the laws that protect the constitutional separation of powers and Congress's power of the purse. And having come from the Appropriations Committee, I hope you'll work with us to do that.
Again, something near and dear to me, and you absolutely have my commitment to working on those. I know there are lots of efforts to strengthen the ICA. And I think also in my commitment to you, I also, commit to working with GAO, who are the arbiters in these things, and they found wrongdoing, and I think we should listen to them when they make those, I think, very thoughtful judgments.
I appreciate that. Look, there's a process, and GAO has pointed out some things we can do to further strengthen that process. Obviously, the executive branch has a role in budget consideration, but as you know, once Congress has spoken, it is imperative that the administration, any administration, follow the law with respect to those decisions. I'd like to just briefly ask you about the issue of long-term unemployment, because we're all hopeful that as we beat this pandemic and with the passage, I hope, of the emergency bill that we expect to pass before the middle of this month, that the economy will begin to improve. And we hope to see steady improvement, more people going back to work. But I'm very worried about individuals who are long-term unemployed. We have over 4 million long-term unemployed Americans right now. These are individuals who've been out of work for more than 6 months looking for work. On top of that, we have over 7 million Americans who have essentially dropped out of the workforce. And the chairman of the Federal Reserve, Chairman Powell, in response to a question I asked him the other day, indicated that we're going to have to be very intentional about policies to help the long-term unemployed. Even before the pandemic, when the economy was working better, we had over 1 million Americans who are long-term unemployed. I don't expect you to commit to any details, but just would you agree that the issue of long-term unemployment is one that we have to address with intentionality, meaning we can't just expect that as the economy improves, that the long-term unemployed will automatically find work, because we know that hasn't been true in the past.
And Senator Van Hollen, thank you for bringing this up. I think one of the goals of government is to ensure that those who are easily left behind, that we ensure that they're not. So I look forward to working with you on this.
I appreciate it. These are individuals who want to work. They're out there looking for a job, and really through no fault of their own, unable to find it. And it hurts them. And of course, it hurts the larger community when we're not able to take advantage of their skills in growing the economy. So thank you. And Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Van Hollen. Senator Padilla.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Ms. Young, for your willingness to serve. I know in a prior hearing for the director of OMB position, I was able to ask questions generally in regards to concern about equity and the role OMB can play in policymaking and budgeting to address equity challenges in America. We also touched on the economic contributions of immigrants over the course of our nation's history. And earlier in this hearing, you've heard a lot of questions about a number of issues, from climate to COVID response and everything in between. So I say all that because I want to raise a couple of issues that are unique, important not just to California, my home state, but the nation as a whole. So let me jump into it. The first of the two is housing and homelessness. The COVID-19 pandemic has exacerbated our nation's ongoing affordable housing and homelessness crises. Nearly 1 in 5 renters across the country, including an estimated 2 million Californians alone, have been unable to catch up on their rent. Even before the pandemic, the lack of affordable housing and rising rents pushed too many into our societal safety net and even into homelessness, with now more than 150,000 individuals experiencing homelessness in California, which could get worse with evictions related to our recent economic downturn. So as we look to build back better, will you commit to ensuring that the President's budget requests seek significant increases for critical housing programs such as Community Development Block Grant Program, the Home Investment Partnership Program, Homelessness Assistance Grants, and expanded Section 8 vouchers? And I welcome any other recommendations or suggestions you have in this regard.
Senator, I certainly do commit. I'm not there yet, so I haven't been involved in the budget development, but those are programs I've supported during my time as staff director of the Appropriations Committee. So I certainly will look to work with you to make sure that there is adequate funding in not just the annual programs, but I do believe there's still work to be done as we recover from COVID and possible other legislation.
Great. Thank you for that. Look forward to following up with you in the weeks, months, and years ahead. The second area, again, I think unique to issues that have been raised already, is relative to scientific research funding. The National Science Foundation is the only agency that funds basic non-biomedical research, as you know. The potentially groundbreaking projects that the NSF supports drive economic growth and spur transformative discoveries that are critical to our lives. Over the past several decades, these breakthroughs have included accelerating supercomputing, barcodes, improving tumor detection, and even shaping the internet as we know it today. Today, the NSF is funding projects to better understand the inner workings of living cells, forecast and predict earthquakes and tsunamis, advance clean energy technologies, and more. Now, while Congress has approved funding increases to NSF's medical counterpart, the National Institutes of Health, NSF funding has not kept pace. So as we act to reverse the denigration of science and scientists that we've seen over the last 4 years, it's critical, in my opinion, that we also support scientists and scientific research with the additional funding that they need. So as you work to develop the President's budget request for fiscal year 2022, will you consider prioritizing new investments in scientific research, including increased funding for the National Science Foundation? And part two of the question is, will you also work to uphold the integrity of science as well as support scientists at federal agencies and research institutions throughout the nation?
I started my career at NIH. I'm certainly aware the attention NIH gets from bipartisan members, but its sister in science, NSF, NIST, NOAA, NASA, all deserve the same level of support. NSF does great work, supports great works among universities, so you certainly have my commitment to ensuring that I would lead my voice to those who want to prioritize NSF. And we certainly have seen a need for that increased basic research during COVID, not just at NIH, but NSF as well.
As one of the few, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. I want to thank Ms. Young for appearing before the committee today. Ms. Young, your full statement will be included in the record. As information for all senators, questions for the record are due by 12 noon tomorrow, with signed hard copies delivered to the committee clerk in Dirksen 624. Email copies will also be accepted due to our current conditions. Under our rules, Ms. Young will have 7 days from receipt of our questions to respond with answers. With no further business.
Mr. Chairman, may I make one last comment before we close out?
Very briefly.
Very briefly. I just had an exchange with Director Wray about the FBI's consistent refusal to answer questions from Congress through the Trump administration. In 9 different committee hearings, 7 got 0 QFRs answered. 0. And what he blamed it on was the interagency process that all has to go through, which OMB runs. So we need to clean that mess up. I think that that's a phony, basically, but we need to clean that mess up.
On the Appropriations Committee, we can barely produce hearing volumes for lack of QFR. So you certainly have my commitment that we need to do better.
Okay, thank you, Senator Whitehouse. Under our rules, Ms. Young will have 7 days from receipt of our questions to respond with answers. With no further business before the committee, this hearing is adjourned. Thank you very much.